One problem that all guitar players always come up against whenever it comes to choosing a guitar for a purpose or for a job is, what pickups will I need for this situation? Now, we have a huge array of different pickup combinations and pickup types available to us as guitar players. So unless you're the sort of guitar player that is able to amass a huge collection of instruments, it's going to be pretty difficult to cover all bases. That is until now. In this video, we're going to check out a really cool pedal that allows you to have any pickup type you want on any guitar you want. And that is the Exchanger Pro from Keyztone. So if you're unfamiliar with the brand Keyztone, they are a brand from France that makes some really innovative products. I've done a bunch of videos for these guys already, and they basically make a bunch of pedals with really cool technology inside that allows you to change how things you already own sound. So I've done a video on a product they have called the Wah-Wah, which basically changes your wah pedal into whatever you want it to be. And they've also done some mini pickup changers called recoils, one of which turns humbuckers into single coils, and the other one that turns single coils into humbuckers. In my hand today, we have the Exchanger Pro. The Exchanger Pro picks up where the original Exchanger left off. It just adds a few new features that makes this even more versatile. If, like me, you're a touring guitar player, something like this is incredible to have at hand. This is the sort of thing that you could have on your pedal board if you can't take all the guitars you need for a show. Perhaps you're a humbucker guy, but you need single coils for one song in a set. Sometimes it's not always practical to just carry a Strat for that purpose, but you could use this to give you that tone. So before we check out the specs of this thing, I just want to let you guys know this is a sponsored video. So the guys at Keyztone are paying me to make this video, and they provided me with this pedal for the purpose of making the video as well. But as always, all the thoughts and opinions you're going to hear in the video are my own. Okay, so first of all, how does this thing work? How does this create different pickup sounds from the information you feed in from your existing pickups? So what this doesn't do is it doesn't take your existing pickup sound and then use EQ to resculpt it to an approximation of the other pickup style. What this does is it completely kills your existing pickup tone. So you put the signal in from whatever pickup you're using, and what this does is it looks at that signal, it analyzes it incredibly quickly, there's no latency with this thing, and then it flattens it out. So it completely kills every single resonant point and frequency bump in your pickup's signal. So what you basically get then is a completely flat line. Most pickups do have a slight high-end tail off, so what this does is it adds a little high-end boost just to give it a complete flat line. Now you don't hear that high-end boost, but having that is very important for the next step, because what this then does is it rebuilds the pickup tone based on the pickup type that you tell it to. So it doesn't resculpt your existing tone, it basically gives you a blank canvas to work with, a completely flat line, then it adds its own kind of magic and creates the sound of the pickup that you select from the pedal. So the Exchanger Pro has 8 different pickup models. You can see here from the rotary switch, we have 8 different models around the top right there. Those range from different types of single coils to P90s to Filtertrons, and we've got a couple of humbuckers in there as well, from high gain metal ones right through to 50 style classic ones. It's incredibly versatile because you can basically turn any pickup into any of those 8. Then we have 2 controls, which actually unlock a huge amount of different functionalities. First of all, we have this tweak control. Now you notice underneath the tweak control there's 2 LED lights. Those will become more apparent once the pedal is plugged in because they are recessed. The first one is for the resonant frequency of the pickup. So every pickup has its own resonant frequency. This is the kind of EQ characteristics that make the pickup what it is. It's the sound of that pickup that we associate with it. So what this does is it allows you to change where those resonant frequencies are. So if you've got a single coil that's particularly bright at, like, let's say 4K, we can move that resonant frequency up and down to kind of sculpt it to what we want. So this isn't modeled on any specific single coil, let's say, but it's basically a generic single coil sound that you can then sculpt to whatever you want it to be. So we can move that resonant frequency points up and down, and then we press that rotary encoder, and then the second LED lights up, and this is the Q factor of that frequency point. So what that means is the Q is how much of it or how little of it. So we can basically boost that Q or attenuate that Q, so we can have more or less of that resonant frequency as well. Then on this side, we have a level control. Now this can be used in 2 different ways. So underneath there's a single coil and a humbucker picture. So what you would do is you would select whichever one of those 2 types that you're working with. So if you're playing with humbuckers, you'd select the humbucker mode. If you're playing with single coils, you select the single coil mode. That is kind of just a brief idea there because obviously we can't select every pickup type on the level control. So what you would do there is if you were playing P90s, for instance, you would select single coils. If you're playing something like a Filtertron, you'd select humbucker. It's just kind of an approximation for basically how the level control works. And then what this can be used for is it can be used to boost the pickup sound. So if you're using single coils and you're modeling a humbucker, the humbucker is going to be louder, so you might want to level match it with single coil. Likewise, if you're doing it the other way around, if you're using humbuckers and modeling a single coil on this, the single coil is going to be quieter, so you could use this to boost the single coil sound so it level matches with your humbuckers. Or you just crank that and just hit the front of your amp. I think it works at about 6 dB, so it'll give your amp a little bit of a kick as well. You can get a bit of breakup from this thing, so you could just crank that control. And yeah, you just go between the humbucker and the single coil by pushing the encoder as well. So this is an incredibly feature-loaded pedal. So to aid that, we've got MIDI as well, so you can run this on a MIDI switcher. You can save a bunch of presets to it and select between all different types of pickup combinations with your MIDI switch as well. The jacks are on the side, and it runs off a standard 9-volt DC. It's not that power hungry from what I've noticed. It seems to just fit into any chain quite well. I've played a bunch of stuff from Keyztone already, and they are really well-built pedals, so this is no exception. It's incredibly well-built. It's got a soft switch, which some people don't like. I don't mind a soft switch. It doesn't really make too much of a difference to me. But if you're someone who really kicks a pedal hard, maybe then you would have a problem with a soft switch. But yeah, this thing is built really robustly. It's very lightweight, which is quite nice because if you're putting it onto an already crowded pedal board, it's not going to add too much additional weight. But yeah, the enclosure of this thing is rock solid. It's really well put together, like everything else I've tried from this brand. So I'm going to plug this thing in now, and we're going to hear how it sounds. All right, so gear-wise, I'm going to be using a few different guitars in this video. I'm going to start off with my PJD St. John Standard for the humbucker in the bridge. This guitar is plugged into the Blackstar Studio 10 6L6, which is running completely clean, and that amp is running via the 2-note Torpedo Captor X. My clean tone in the amp sounds like this. So before we hear some tones from the Exchanger Pro, I want to let you guys know about 5 simple rules that are listed on the Keyztone website to get the most out of this pedal. Rule number 1 is this has to be first in your signal chain. This works by flattening whatever you put into it and then rebuilding it accordingly. So if you've got something like your favorite overdrive or your favorite compressor before this, which has its own EQ signature, it's going to flatten that as well. So it will work, but it will flatten whatever's in front of it to a completely neutral point. So obviously if you have a favorite sound that you always use, you don't really want to mess with that. So put this first with the guitar straight in front of it. Rule number 2, it only works with passive pickups. I don't know the science behind this, but with active pickups, this will only function as like an EQ shaping tool. It won't give you the full pickup rebuilding sound that you'll get from a passive pickup. So keep pickups passive to get the best out of this pedal. Rule number 3, it has to be connected with a cable. A wireless system will do exactly the same thing. A wireless system will have some kind of frequency compensation for there not being a cable between your guitar and the wireless receiver. So you can't have that with this pedal. This needs to see the direct signal from the guitar, so it has to be used with a cable as well. Rule number 4, it won't work with a treble bleed circuit on the guitar. So if you have a treble bleed circuit, you can probably get around it by keeping the volume on 10, but don't quote me on that. It is advised to not have a treble bleed circuit to get the most out of this pedal. And rule number 5, keep the volume control on 10, because that will give the Exchanger Pro the full kind of unfiltered guitar tone. Some guitars will change the tone as the volume control changes, which then can affect how the Exchanger Pro sees that pickup. So keep the control on 10 for the most impact. Okay, so to start, I'm just going to play with a bridge humbucker, and I'm going to go through some different pickup combinations. So I'm just going to go through all 8 while playing. So we've got Rockabilly, which is your kind of Gretsch Filtertron style pickup. P90, got a modern humbucker, so that'll be quite interesting because this is more of a vintage flavored humbucker, so we will notice a bit of a difference there. We've got a classic single coil, and over here we've got Hot Rails, which is like a single coil sized humbucker. Underneath that we've got a vintage single coil, a 50 style humbucker, and a metal style humbucker. So I'm just going to play a little bit and just move through all 8 positions. So I'm going to start with the pedal off, and then I'll turn it on. So as I was going through those different pickup selections, you could hear that there were some volume jumps and also some clipping. Now that is where the level control comes in handy, because what I can do there is I can volume match those different pickup volume jumps. So obviously I'm using humbuckers. When I went to, let's say, a vintage single coil, the sound got a lot quieter. So I can use that level control to compensate for it by boosting. So let's say I'm going to do this. So that's probably a little too hot, but you get the idea there. I could do the same if I was using a really hot pickup, like let's say the metal humbucker. And I wanted to attenuate that volume. I can bring this control down. And get it a little bit more evenly balanced. What I can also do though is I can go the other way. So if I've got a pickup that's already hot, I can boost it more. And I can use that to drive the front of the amp as well. So I'm not actually even using any drive pedals here. That is the exchanger hitting the front end of the Black Star and causing that breakout. So now I'm going to do the same thing, but with single coils. So I'm using my Schecter Nick Johnston here. I'm going to be on the bridge single coil, which sounds like this. And I'm going to be going through all the different pickup selections again. So I'm going to go back to the start, to the rockabilly pickup. I'm going to play a bit, turn the pedal on, and go through all 8 of the pickup options. Before I do, I need to change which pickup type is selected. So I'm going to go to single coil, and I'm going to hold this down, and you'll notice that it flashes. That now locks it in that place. So when I go through the different pickup options here, it stays on single coil mode. If you don't lock that down, and I select humbuckers, let's say, when I do this, it resets back to single coil. So you always have to lock it in place. I think the pedal actually defaults to single coil anyway. So being on single coil now, that's not going to change, but I have locked it in position just in case. So on single coils, you can really hear the fatness that adds for like a humbucker sound. Now, again, it's still hitting the amp pretty hard and clipping. So what we could do is, let's say we were using a vintage style humbucker. That's still giving me a little bit of clip. But what I could do is I could dial that volume back. So my clean volume is this with the pickup. Still a bit of a boost. I could probably come back a bit more. That kind of gets me in the same volume ballpark, but just brings in the tone of a humbucker. And then the exact same thing applies. I can go the other way and give it a boost. You'll probably find inside of this pedal that there will be certain pickup types that you'll gravitate towards. Now, in my opinion, this really is kind of aimed more at the guys who need to turn a humbucker into a single coil or a single coil into a humbucker. Having the extra stuff is a nice option, but for instance, if you're playing a single coil loaded guitar, there's probably not going to be many instances where you really need a metal humbucker as such. For me personally, if I was on a gig where I needed a high gain sound, I would not be taking this guitar. I would take something with humbuckers already. But like I said, you never know. You could be on a gig somewhere and all of a sudden you might have to drop in a metal classic into your funk set. Then it's going to come in handy. So yeah, it's got a lot of features in there. Even just with the 2 guitars and just cycling through the 8 different presets, straight away we're off to a good start there. We can hear a bunch of cool stuff. Now I'm going to just take a few classic tones and look at the frequency response and cue controls. So I'm already on my Strat, so I'm just going to stick with the 50s humbucker now to start with. I'm going to bring the boost back a little bit so we've got a bit of crunch, but not as much. And we'll look at the resonant frequency peak and the cue control. So in each pickup's default state, it just goes to whatever the exchanger kind of is programmed with as like the kind of key frequency response for that pickup. So with this control, I can move that to the left or to the right. So I'm just going to play a bit and sweep that for you. So it's not super obvious, it's quite subtle, but there's a little shift to a darker sound and a brighter sound. Obviously, when Keyztone were designing this pedal, they didn't want it to be extremes because we want to stick within the boundaries of what that pickup can do. So while I'm in those positions, let's say that slightly darker position, I can go to the cue control and I can boost or cut that range of frequency. Now, obviously, I'm making quite extreme movements there from like kind of all the way up and all the way down so you can hear the range of it. You could obviously sit down and really fine tune that to your own tastes as well. But I think that sounds great. It's a really good humbucker sound. It really has the fatness and the warmth of a 50 style humbucker, but with that clarity in the top end. But then we can use the resonant frequency and the cue control to really kind of fine tune how we want that pickup to behave. So that is incredibly useful. So I'm going to come back to my PJD St. John now. And I'm going to do the same thing, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. So let's set that back to humbucker mode and hold that button to lock it in. So that's now locked in humbucker mode. You see that light flashing, and I'm going to pick, let's go for a vintage single coil because we just did a vintage humbucker sound. So clean tone again, and single coil. So that's already slightly boosted. I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a kick just to get a bit more volume out. Nice and twangy compared to the warmth of the humbucker. Now I'll do the same thing with the resonant frequency, so I'll just play and move that control. Now, all of those EQ shifts are subtle, You're not hearing any drastic movements there because really we're not moving that frequency peak too much. There's like kind of an expected boundary within the confines of what that pickup can give us. So a single coil, for instance, is no good in us boosting an incredibly low frequency that a single coil can't reproduce anyway, because then we're not using the pedal in the right way. So that is just kind of working within a set boundary there. But once we're in that boundary, we can then use the Q control to boost or cut that frequency. So let's say this is where I like it. I can then go into the Q side, and then I can really go to town. So between those two different things, we really have an endless array of different possibilities. So I could turn my humbucker guitar into a dark sounding P90. So let's just bring the resonant peak down and the Q control down. But maybe I want a bit more gain on that. The Exchanger Pro also doesn't have to be used for these extreme pickup shifts from, humbucker to single coil or vice versa. We can use it to just revoice an existing pickup. So the pickups in this are by a company called Cream T Pickups, and the bridge pickup is a very PAF sounding pickup that was kind of designed to Billy Gibbons specs. So that is obviously 50s and 60s tones are kind of the name of the game there. What I could do is I could convert that to a modern humbucker sound. So you can hear obviously mine is a little bit more open sounding. It's not getting hit as hard because there is a bit of a boost here. So I'm going to turn the level down a bit. Match that level. So we're about the same there with the level. There's not too much difference. So I can just revoice the pickup slightly now. So I could have a slightly darker, but boost the lows on this. You can hear the slightly higher output emulated because even though the volume is set as low as it goes on there, there's still that little element of clipping. But then I could obviously just crank it. So I think that is an incredibly useful feature for this, as well as the extreme pickup shifts. Just being able to revoice something slightly that you already have is incredibly useful. Now this guitar, for instance, like I said, has vintage style pickups. So going to a modern humbucker just fattens it up a bit. But let's say I'm on a gig where I kind of need to play something quite high gain. I could go to the metal humbucker and kind of revoice this to be a metal sounding humbucker. So clean again. Now obviously we're still getting that boost, so let's take that down. You can hear how it kind of pushes those lows a little bit and just slightly rolls off the top because this pickup is quite sparkly. It kind of boxes that down a bit more and there's a bit more of that kind of focus in the mid-range there. What I could do is I could just tweak that a little bit now with the resonant peak and the Q control. So I'm going to boost the lows just a little bit. You can hear kind of a bit more of that mid honk. So I'm going to boost the level now, just for some gain. obviously all that gain is just coming from the exchanger hitting the amp harder. In those situations where I'm talking about where you're going to need high gain, you're probably going to be pairing it with a high gain amp or a high gain pedal as well. I tend to sit more in the crunchy side of things, but even that sounds great. It's definitely got that thickness that a high output pickup has. So yeah, I really like the Exchanger Pro. Now, I think this is a great piece of kit. I'm a big fan of the stuff Keyztone do anyway, as I've said already in the video. This, for someone like me who tours a lot and is sometimes limited by space constraints of what I can take, is an incredibly versatile tool. Now, for me personally, there is one thing that is kind of, I don't want to say an issue, but is kind of an issue for the way I work. And that is the fact that it just can't be done with a wireless system, because I play with a wireless system live, because, you know, play some quite big stages, and you know what it's like, you can trail cables and it can get very cluttered on stage. So I like to keep my space completely free of cable. And, you know, yeah, I play with a wireless system, and as a result, can't really use the Exchanger Pro live. Now, for me personally, this would be straight on my pedal board if there was a way to make that work with wireless. Now, maybe there is. Maybe it's something the guys at Keyztone can advise me on better. But yeah, I would love to be able to work this with my wireless system so I could take it on the road with me, because for me personally, what a great piece of gear. I mean, that's amazing, because I sometimes have to take 3 guitars with me on some shows because of the range of material I play. Having something like this could completely negate me needing to take 1 guitar for 1 song, which, as we know, is a bit of a pain to do sometimes. But yeah, that is the Exchanger Pro. There are some links down below in the description where you can check this thing out. Go and give it a look. It's a great pedal. I love it. I am really hoping I can find a way to take this on the road, because yeah, I'm so impressed with this thing. I absolutely love it, and I think it's such a great pedal. It's such a good tool. And to be honest, it's the sort of thing that even if I wasn't actively using it every gig, I would probably keep it on my pedal board, or at a minimum, keep it in a case or you know, somewhere on the road with me. So if I do need it, it's to hand. You could probably get away with having this as a studio tool as well, because, you know, if you're in the studio and you can only take 1 guitar, you could use this to get a bunch of different sounds too. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you think of the different pickup sounds that you've heard in this video. Let me know down below in the description what you think. And while you're down there doing that, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you so much for watching.